There's one topic in ufology that strikes fear and paranoia in any researcher. The first documented encounter was in 1953. 44 years before Hollywood turned it into a punchline, a man named Albert Bender sat in his home in Bridgeport, Connecticut, received 3 visitors dressed entirely in black, and shut down the most significant UFO research organization in America overnight. He didn't speak about what they told him for 9 years. Before the movie, before the meme, before anyone had a cultural template for what men in black were, witnesses across the country were describing the same beings independently. Perfectly dressed, slightly wrong, always arriving within hours of a UFO sighting, and always leaving witnesses too terrified to talk. Here is what makes these encounters genuinely disturbing. They're not describing government agents. Government agents don't make coins disappear in front of you. They don't struggle to use a pen. They don't tell you they are running low on energy and then vanish from a locked road with no vehicle. Something showed up at these people's doors, and the pattern across 70 years of independent testimony is too consistent to dismiss. Here is the full record. 1952. Albert Bender founded the International Flying Saucer Bureau in Bridgeport, Connecticut. It became one of the first serious civilian UFO research organizations in America, with hundreds of members across multiple countries contributing sighting reports and analysis. By early 1953, Bender was convinced he had solved the central mystery of UFO origins. He was preparing to publish his conclusions in the organization's bulletin, Space Review. In July 1953, 3 men appeared at his home. He described them as dressed entirely in black suits, black hats, and the Homburg style. Their faces were described as unusually pale. Their eyes had a quality he struggled to articulate, a luminosity, a slight wrongness, that he said made direct eye contact almost unbearable. They were accompanied, he said, by an overpowering smell of sulfur. The men did not identify themselves by name or agency. They told Bender what he had discovered was correct. They told him he was to immediately cease all UFO research. They told him the consequences of continuing were not ones he wanted to experience. Bender shut down the International Flying Saucer Bureau within weeks. He published one final bulletin with a single message to members. The mystery has been solved, but I am not permitted to discuss the solution. He then went silent for 9 years. In 1962, he finally published his account in a book called Flying Saucers and the 3 Men. What he described was not government agents. The beings that visited him, he said, were not human. They had used his home as a kind of staging point. He described encounters that crossed into territory that no government intimidation operation has ever resembled. The critical detail. 1953. There was no cultural concept of men in black. No template. No prior accounts in circulation. Bender had nothing to borrow from. What he described came from direct experience. August 3, 1965. Rex Heflin was a 38-year-old highway maintenance engineer for Orange County, California. At approximately 12:30 in the afternoon, he observed a hat-shaped craft flying low over the road ahead of him. He had a Polaroid camera in the truck. He took 4 photographs. The images were sharp, close, and showed a clearly structured craft in broad daylight. They were subsequently analyzed by multiple independent researchers and aviation experts, and no conventional explanation, model, hoax, natural phenomenon was ever confirmed. Within days of the photographs becoming known, 2 men visited Heflin at his home. They identified themselves as representatives of NORAD, the North American Aerospace Defense Command. They showed credentials. They were polite. They asked to examine the original Polaroids. They took the photographs and left. Heflin contacted NORAD to follow up. NORAD stated they had never sent anyone to his address. The men were never identified. The original photographs were gone for 28 years. In 1993, the original Polaroids were returned to Heflin anonymously, mailed to his address with no return address and no explanation. They arrived with strange markings on the envelope that investigators subsequently connected to a pattern appearing in other MIB-adjacent cases. Who took them? Who held them for 28 years? Who returned them and why? None of these questions have ever been answered. A researcher silenced. A photographer's evidence confiscated by men who didn't exist. A coin that disappeared into thin air. Subscribe. Dead Man Secrets goes this deep every single week. September 11, 1976. Dr. Herbert Hopkins was a 58-year-old physician and hypnotist in Old Orchard Beach, Maine. He was acting as a consultant on a UFO abduction case, a reported teleportation incident that had attracted significant research interest. He was home alone that evening when the phone rang. The caller identified himself as a representative of a UFO research organization and asked if he could visit to discuss the case. Hopkins agreed. He hung up the phone and walked to the door, and the man was already there. Already on the porch. In the time it took Hopkins to walk from the phone to the door, the man had traveled from wherever he had made the call. The figure that entered was described in detail that Hopkins repeated consistently across multiple subsequent interviews. Completely bald. No eyebrows. No eyelashes. Skin described as dead white, the color of paper. Lips that appeared to have a pink or red coloring applied to them, like cosmetic simulation of healthy skin tone. Dressed entirely in black. Hat, suit, shoes. All black and perfectly pressed. He spoke in a flat, measured monotone, each word given equal weight, like someone reading from a script rather than conversing. During the visit, the man placed a coin on the table between them. He told Hopkins to watch it. Hopkins described watching the coin become slowly translucent, losing material substance gradually, until it disappeared entirely. The man told him, "Neither you nor anyone else on this planet will ever see that coin again." He then told Hopkins to destroy all his research materials related to the abduction case. All recordings. All notes. All documentation. Then he said, and Hopkins quoted this directly in subsequent interviews, that he was running low on energy and needed to leave. He stood, moved to the door in what Hopkins described as a slow, mechanical gait, and left. Hopkins went immediately to the window. The road was empty. No car. No figure. No sound of departure. Hopkins destroyed his research materials. He subsequently gave multiple recorded interviews about the encounter. His account never changed. The case is documented in the Journal of UFO Studies and has been cited in academic literature on anomalous phenomena. It is not a tabloid story. It is one of the most thoroughly documented anomalous contact cases in the research literature. 3 encounters across 23 years with no connection between the witnesses. What is consistent is 1. Timing. MIB encounters happen within hours or days of a significant UFO sighting or research development. Not weeks, hours. The response time suggests either an extremely efficient surveillance operation or a monitoring capability that doesn't require conventional intelligence gathering. 2. The physical description. Across hundreds of documented MIB reports spanning 7 decades and multiple countries, the physical description is remarkably consistent. Pale or waxy skin. Slightly oversized or unusually dark eyes. Perfect black clothing that somehow reads as wrong, like a costume approximating formal dress rather than actual formal dress. Movements that are precise but slightly mechanical. 3. Behavioral anomalies. Multiple witnesses independently describe MIB figures struggling with basic human tasks. Difficulty using a pen. Unfamiliarity with ordinary objects. Speech patterns that are too formal, too measured, too devoid of the natural rhythms of human conversation. As if the performance of being human is being executed from a script, rather than lived from the inside. 4. The energy reference. The Hopkins encounter is not the only one in which a MIB figure references fatigue or energy depletion. Multiple independent witnesses describe similar statements. The figure needing to leave, becoming visibly less stable or coherent as the encounter extends. 5. The impossibility of departure. In numerous cases, witnesses report that MIB figures leave a location with no vehicle present and no visible means of travel. They simply are no longer there. These are not the operational signatures of a government intimidation program. They are the signatures of something operating by a different set of physical rules. John Keel investigated Men in Black encounters as part of his broader work on the Mothman phenomenon in Point Pleasant, West Virginia, one of the most densely documented anomalous event clusters in American history. Keel's conclusion, developed over years of field investigation, was direct. MIB are not government agents. They are not human. They belong to the same category of phenomenon as the beings reported in UAP encounters, operating through a mechanism that allows manipulation of physical reality, human perception, and memory. His framework, which he called ultra-terrestrials, proposed that these entities are not extraterrestrial in origin, but operate from a dimension adjacent to ours, intersecting with human reality at specific points under specific conditions. The sulfur smell reported by Bender and others appears throughout the MIB literature and appears with equal frequency in historical accounts of demonic visitation, poltergeist phenomena, and certain categories of psychic attack. Keel specifically noted this cross-category consistency as evidence that the same phenomenon had been encountered and interpreted differently across different historical and cultural contexts. In the medieval period, they were demons. In the early modern period, they were agents of secret societies. In the 20th century, they were government agents. The costume changes. The phenomenon doesn't. Keel's framework has been independently reinforced by Jacques Vallée, the astronomer and computer scientist who proposed the interdimensional hypothesis for UAP. Vallee's research specifically documents the overlap between fairy and pixie encounter accounts from pre-industrial Europe and modern MIB encounters. Same physical signatures, same behavioral anomalies, same aftermath. Different century, different label. Same thing. In July 2023, David Grush testified before Congress under oath that the U.S. government had recovered non-human biologics from craft of non-human origin. What received less attention was the broader testimony from multiple sources about a category of non-human entity that interacts directly with human witnesses, not through craft or abduction, but through direct contact that mimics human behavior. The description in the classified testimony that has partially leaked into the research community maps onto the MIB profile with uncomfortable precision. Entities that appear human but are not. That interact with targeted individuals. That seem to monitor and respond to human research into their activities. The intelligence community's term for this category, in the language that has leaked from insiders, is not Men in Black. But the operational description is identical. Something has been showing up at the doors of people who get too close to answers. Since at least 1953, possibly much longer. It wears black. It struggles to perform humanity convincingly. It runs low on energy. And it has never once been identified, photographed clearly, or apprehended. In 70 years of encounters, Albert Bender solved the UFO mystery in 1953. 3 beings visited him, and he went silent for 9 years. Rex Heflin photographed a craft in broad daylight in 1965. Men who didn't exist took his photographs and held them for 28 years. Herbert Hopkins watched a coin dematerialize in front of him in 1976. His visitor ran low on energy and disappeared from a road with no vehicle. The pattern runs through 70 years of independent testimony across multiple countries. Always the same physical description. Always the same behavioral anomalies. Always the same impossible departures. John Keel and Jacques Vallée, 2 of the most rigorous researchers in the field, both concluded the same thing. These are not government agents. They are something operating by different physical rules, monitoring human investigation into their activities, and occasionally stepping in to shut it down. The government has its own category for them in classified testimony that is only now beginning to surface. They were here before the movie, before the meme, before anyone had a name for them. And according to every piece of evidence available, they are still here. Drop a comment, government agents or something else. Because the coin that disappeared, and the man who ran out of energy, don't fit any surveillance protocol ever written. Next week on Dead Man's Secrets, James Forrestal, America's first Secretary of Defense. He'd been warning about UFOs and Soviet infiltration for years. Then he was declared mentally ill, committed against his will to Bethesda Naval Hospital, and fell from a 16th floor window. The official verdict: suicide. The timeline says otherwise. Subscribe. I'll see you there.